Andrew Denton is our special guest host on the show today. And Andrew, we know that you have been a big supporter of the right to die here in this country. And we want to delve a little bit deeper into that. You've spoken about your father's long and very painful death. What did you think then, and what keeps you going on this issue of euthanasia?
Well, can I start by saying I don't advocate for a right to die, because we're all going to die. It's not a right. What I advocate for is a right to ask for help at the end of life if medical science can no longer help you, and a right not to be tortured. But going back to my dad, yes, it was a very, very painful death to watch, and it was very shocking to watch. That was 20 years ago. But a couple of years ago, I read an article by an Australian writer whose father was Dutch and dying of cancer, and under their laws could be assisted to die, euthanized. And she described his last week, and it was a week of farewells. All his friends came, they honoured him. He said everything he wanted to say to his family. He gave the things he wanted to give. His last night was spent listening to Mozart, looking at the night sky, and the next day, remember, this was a man dying of cancer. It's very important to remember that. These people are dying. When the doctors came to assist him to die, he hugged his family. It was gentle, it was civilised, and I thought, why can't we do that here? Why are good people in this country being left to die bad deaths?
Is it a fear of... There's something, and I guess so deeply antithetical to the human condition, about knowing when you're going to die and planning for it. And I think, is that what you think the resistance comes from?
Oh, look, I think the resistance comes from many places. For some people, it's a core religious thing. Only God can giveth and taketh away life, and I understand that, and people are entitled to that belief. But because there is no greater primal fear than that of death, I think emotions sometimes overrule logic in this situation. You know, people that oppose these laws love to use the word killing. Oh, we're killing people. But these are people who are dying. And what we're trying to do with these laws is offer them, if they're faced with a terrible disease that can't be helped by medical science, we're offering them the choice, their choice, to take some control of that and not die that terrible death.
To go horribly or to go...
On Friday, I think it was, you launched a campaign in South Australia urging South Australian politicians to pass a bill endorsing assisted dying when you need it. Do you think it'll pass?
Look, I've spent a lot of time in South Australia. I'm going back there today talking to politicians. There's a lot of goodwill. There's a lot of politicians now starting to understand the issue. But Ida, this is the 14th time it's gone before their parliament. And it's been derailed in the past by the same arguments, the fear campaigns that have been run for 20 years. And the number one argument put against it, which people think at face value sounds plausible, is, well, but if you have these laws, what's going to stop greedy kids bumping granny off? And therefore, it can't possibly be safe. How do we protect these vulnerable people?
Well, you have stipulations, don't you?
There's very clear stipulations. The way these laws work, the way these laws are proposed in Australia is they have very strict and clear criteria, which is you have to have an extreme illness, which is clearly going to lead towards your death, with unbearable suffering, which is beyond the help of medical science. And that is assessed by not just one, but two doctors, if they're concerned about your state of mind, also a psychiatrist. So to kind of explain it to you, the thought that an elderly person whose kids might be encouraging them to step forward and put their hand up for voluntary euthanasia, that they could convince two doctors of this when they have no serious disease, is as ludicrous an idea as them walking into a doctor's surgery and saying, I want chemotherapy now. What do you think a doctor's going to say?
But
why do you want chemotherapy?
Reinforce, you know, and I've talked about this, doesn't it reinforce the fact that people must leave a letter stipulating the care they want when the end of life approaches? And it must be there. It must be a legal document.
This is part of this whole question. Advanced care directives are important. Palliative care is important. But, you know, when people talk about vulnerable in this equation, and this is the point I've been trying to impress on our politicians, who are the truly vulnerable in this question? And the truly vulnerable are the people at the cross-parliamentary inquiry in Victoria, after 10 months, revealed in great detail the truly vulnerable are those people who are dying in great pain because medicine can't help them. And the most shockingly vulnerable, and the incidence is alarmingly high in Australia are elderly Australians faced with incurable diseases who, because they do not have a choice, because medicine can't help them, are committing violent and lonely suicide. These are the people that this law is designed to protect, and these are the vulnerable that should be being protected. And it bothers me that opponents of these laws, because when you press them and you say, well, what law do you think would be safe? They say none. And what they're effectively saying to these people is, you just have to suffer. We will not help you. And I think that is unacceptable in a compassionate society.
Tell us very quickly about the book that you've brought, The Damage Done.
Okay, this is the most depressing book published in modern Australia. This is a collection of 72 testimonials from families, parents, doctors, nurses, coroners, about what happens in the absence of these laws. And they are heartbreaking stories. And I'll tell you just one, which is a 91-year-old South Australian woman called Eileen Dorr, who last year was dying of cancer. And she wanted help to die quickly, but there is no legal way. So for 19 weeks, she had to endure her dying. And in an effort to hasten it, she did what is legal in this country. She started to starve herself to death. And she kept a diary, Eileen, and she wrote in this diary, "My country's laws decree death by 1,000 cuts for me." Now tell me that we can't do better for the Eileen Dorrs, people who've given their lives to our society. Our society should do better for them.
It's an important conversation that we need to have. Andrew Denton, thank you.